The Cincinnati Bengals fell well short of the mark in what we called a prove-it game, a measuring stick game. Well, they failed that test in a bad way.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Liscow. He's your host, James Rapien. We come to you after a tough game for the Cincinnati Bengals in which they failed a test we were hoping to see them pass and hoping to see a game go very differently than we saw today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network here on Locked On Bengals, covering your team every day. And we're on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. So if you're new, you can hit the subscribe button. If you're not new, welcome back. Shout out to the everydayers and shout out to those of you in the First Listen Club, making Locked On Bengals part of your routine. Today's episode of Locked On Bengals is sponsored by Gametime. If you're ever looking for tickets, Gametime is the place for you. And right now on your first purchase, you can save $20 with promo code Locked On NFL. James, we got a promising start from the Cincinnati Bengals, getting out to a 10-3 lead before things really spiraled out of control. They had a 10-minute opening drive to the game, scoring a touchdown. But then, boy, was it bad pretty quickly thereafter. What are your big takeaways after watching the Bengals get trounced and drop to 0-4 at home?
Well, first things first, they outplayed the Eagles in the first half, and they were tied 10-10. And that just can't happen when you outplay this team that we talked about, had a ton of talent, and I really tried to hammer that home, how dynamic they could potentially be on offense when called upon. And look, this was you're right, the make us believe game. And I think the Bengals made a lot of people believe it. I do, that they're a bad football team, because that's how they played in the second half. Bad football. I mean, Joe Burrow was 10 of 13 for like 65 yards in the second half. I forget the exact yardage. It was under 70 yards, had the one interception. The offense really couldn't get going outside of the lone touchdown drive they had. And the defense gave up scores on every single possession. It was Commanders' week 3 defense. And Jalen Hurts had plenty of time, so much so that our old buddy Fred Johnson literally had Trey Hendrickson run so far downfield, he ended up in northern Kentucky. I mean, this guy had to run so far to get the edge. On that Devontae Smith touchdown, he was 14 yards into the backfield before he was able to get around Fred a little bit. And that's way too much time. And that's the theme I think we've seen is the defense being inconsistent. Fine, well then can the offense pick it up? And early on, it looked like the offense was up to the task, and obviously that fizzled really after the opening drive. But after that, they showed some flashes. Joe Burrow made some plays. It just obviously wasn't enough.
It was really 2 drives, though, where it was okay, but the second drive took magic. Like you said, it required Joe Burrow to evade an unblocked pass rusher on a mishandled stunt on the left side. Stop me if you've heard that before. Well, don't stop me because I'm going to keep talking. Then they get a miracle conversion on the Burrow scramble and throw to Gesicki, uncovering late in the play, who's able to get upfield for 3rd and 22. They even get a deep shot to Jermaine Burton in this game and are unable to do anything afterward. You get another missed 50-plus yard kick for Evan McPherson. That's a topic now that is getting louder and louder. And where you score on a 17-play, 10-minute, 4-second drive to start the game, there's good and bad there, right? I was both encouraged and a little bit trepidatious, let's say, a little bit hesitant after that first drive, because I'm thinking on the one hand, it looks like they're seeing it really well. Joe Burrow's finding the answers to Vic Fangio's coverages. They're getting just enough, but they're also not able to get the ball downfield, and the run game looked really bad. Sometimes, though, the run game looks really bad at the start of games, and then you can figure it out later. The Bengals held Saquon Barkley for much of this game to, the low 3-point-something yards per carry before the final offensive drive for the Eagles, or maybe the second to last, I don't remember which one anymore, leads to a lot of big runs for Barkley. Sometimes the run game looks bad early and recovers later. Not the case today. Run game, absolutely dreadful all game outside of Chase Brown's touchdown run and maybe one other run, a toss play that goes for 4 yards, or maybe it wasn't a toss, but like those are their most successful runs of the day. And so on the one hand, you have some concerning signs for the run game early. You have the appearance of Joe Burrow is actually playing really well, distributing it really well. They're 7 for their first 7 on third downs, but at the same time, while that's really encouraging to go 7 for 7 on third downs, you had to get to 7 third downs in 2 drives and 8 because they didn't convert the last one. And when you're forced to convert on third down time after time after time, your early downs are so bad. And they were early in this game. And obviously they didn't recover late in the game and had their own issues late in the game. There are some signs there that maybe this thing isn't going to be sustainable. So while it looked like maybe they had some answers early, it was just like taking a very long time to get to plays. And while they had a couple of awesome plays in this game on offense, there are highlights. There's a highlight reel for Joe Burrow in this game. There's a highlight reel for Mike Gesicki in this game. There's also lowlights for those guys. And while I think Burrow was good in this game and did everything he could to put the team on his back, there just wasn't enough surrounding him on the field, on the sidelines, in the front office. You can go all the way up, and we'll have plenty of time to do that. There just wasn't enough there to beat a team that was honestly in a very similar spot to the Bengals we talked about coming into this game. And now after this game, the opinions of the Eagles and the Bengals, both, I think, between us, James, and the trajectory that they're on and around the league, couldn't be more different.
Well, I guess, yeah, sure. I'm not going to overreact because the game got away from them in the second half.
I mean,
I get
what it was bad.
Yeah, it got away from them in the second half. Like, that's what happened. But the thing that's more alarming to me is when Joe Burrow did put on the cape, does make a 3rd and 22 play, does take them downfield on a 17-play, 70-yard touchdown drive, and it's tied. That's where I'm like, oh, no. Like, if they don't get a stop coming out of halftime, this doesn't feel good. Because Joe's human. They don't have T. They don't have Orlando. Those things do matter, even though we can pretend they don't. It would have mattered if the Eagles didn't have Devontae Smith, for example. It didn't matter about their left tackle because Fred Johnson had Trey Hendrickson. It just gave him fits all game for whatever reason. And you tie that together and they came back to earth a lot. And it is frustrating because to me, I mean, they're right in it. It's 24-17. And the play of the game is that 4th and 1. And you have to get that play. It's a gotta have it play where you have to get that first, because if you don't, if you punt it, you know the Eagles are probably going to score. And they're certainly going to score if you don't get it. And they did. And now the game's over. You hold them to a field goal somehow. I don't know how the defense did it, but they did. But you have to have that play. They didn't have it. There were a couple turning points. The Evan McPherson missed field goal was a huge one. He makes that. It puts them up 10. Just feels different. It feels like they have a double-digit lead, and it feels like they deserved a double-digit lead, and they didn't have it and go into halftime tied. So there's one. And then 2, it's that 4th down. And man, oh man, like we'll talk about the defense because I think that Devontae Smith touchdown was a big play too. But after that, you're like, all right, well, the offense has to go score. And 4th and 1, you have to get that. And that isn't the play I dial up in a gotta-have-it moment. I just don't. And throw it 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage. I just don't like that, even if it is to Jamar Chase. I'd rather you throw a go to Jamar Chase on 4th and 1.
Well, and that's a trend too, right? Like
obviously, it didn't work out.
The throws short of the 6, the throws behind the line of scrimmage. We've seen that from them before. They haven't learned that lesson. The way they got there was running the ball in 2nd and 2 when their running game has been dreadful all game. And then they bring an extra lineman out and telegraph run, and then they run it on 3rd and 1. And then they throw it behind the line of scrimmage on 4th and 1. That entire sequence is terrible. And it starts with the 1st and 10 where Burrow is flushed immediately on a play fake from shotgun. As soon as he's done executing that part of the play, he's running and he has to scramble. And a good play for Joe Burrow to pick up 8 yards, nearly had the 1st down if Zach Vaughn doesn't get him by the shoes. But then after that, you can't run it in this game. And this is such an issue. Like, the passing offense is still good. It's just not enough when you're running the ball for 1 yard, 0 yards, and then throwing behind the sticks on a bad decision. And maybe that's Burrow. Maybe that's the coaching staff. It looked like that was the design. There was potentially an option for Eric All coming across the formation. Maybe Burrow predetermined that Chase could get that corner too quickly, and they had a good play from the Eagles to shut it down, and it was rookie corner Cooper DeJean who made that play. Maybe they just got, but it's a critical moment in the game. The plays leading up to that critical moment in the game, I thought, were at best questionable decisions to try to run the ball when you haven't been running the ball. and then they don't get the critical play they need. And that's the way this team has gone too often this year, not making critical plays on repeat. And that's what they are at this point. And that makes you mostly a bad team. But like I said, we'll have plenty of time to talk about the big picture stuff, more to talk about in this specific game and how it got away from them. We will continue to bemoan this game, unfortunately, coming up next. This episode of Locked On Bengals is sponsored by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find the quality professionals that are right for the role, and I wish the Bengals would do this too. You fortunately can learn from their mistakes and check out LinkedIn Jobs to find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. It's not just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't even actively looking for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, well, you're looking in the wrong place. 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours on LinkedIn. You can hire professionals like a professional at LinkedIn. All you have to do is go post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl, where you can post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
Today's show is also brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy the way it should be, where you don't have to deal with any injuries. You don't have to worry about season-long anything. No, PrizePicks is simple. You pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on PrizePicks. And winning up to 100 times your money, you can do that with as little as 4 correct picks. So maybe next week you're going to look at it and say Joe Burrow is going to throw all over the Las Vegas Raiders. But Chase Brown isn't going to be able to hit that PrizePicks rushing yards projection. You could put those together and boom, start winning today. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup with PrizePicks. Again, download the PrizePicks app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game.
You mentioned the defense and some of the letdown on that side of the ball, James. Maybe that's where we go next, because going into this game, we talked about the vulnerability of the Eagles, missing Mekhi Becton, obviously missing Jordan Mailata at left tackle. Lane Johnson injured in this game, came back, played through whatever he was dealing with. But this offensive line was down some guys, and in pure passing situations, on paper, and going back to their recent performances, looked beatable. But when Jalen Hurts dropped back to pass, he was unharassed, had massive pockets. And you referenced that play to Devontae Smith where Trey Henderson is run 14 yards deep. It's also a play action play that leads to double teams on your defensive tackles who are reacting to the flow of the offensive line in the run play. And Sam Hubbard getting handled after hesitating and playing the run at first by a tight end one-on-one. The pass rush in this game was not existent, afforded Jalen Hurts way too much time, and let Hurts play, honestly, perhaps his best game in over a year, maybe going back to 2022 when the Eagles made their Super Bowl run.
Yeah, that play was a nightmare, comedy of errors. I mean, from every angle. I mean, you have Trey Hendrickson running to Covington to try to get the edge. Sam Hubbard can't get by a guy that he should just throw out of his way to make a play. Jalen Hurts is hanging out in the pocket. And then he throws a ball so high that Ken Griffey Jr. in his prime would be the only one that could track it down. But Jordan Battle just can't see it, has no idea where the ball is, and looks lost coverage-wise deep, and you give up the touchdown. That's such a huge play because the Bengals come back after being down 17-10. They respond, they score. And so that drive is so huge. And for the defense to have no resistance. I mean, that drive was 5 plays, I believe. I'm going to pull it up right now. 3 plays. It was a 3-play drive with 2 first downs, Jake. Mm-hmm. That means 2 first down plays and then a touchdown play. That's 0 resistance. They might as well not even have been on the field. And so that describes the second half, that play for sure. And when that happened, I'm like, all right. Like I still thought that the Burrow magic early, it just felt like to me like one of those games like, they've and in the past they have done this. They find ways to win games like today. And I think that's a big difference between the 21 Bengals or the 22 Bengals, or last year, that mid-season run where it felt like Joe Burrow was playing like Joe again and this team was still really good. Today, they just kind of fizzle and they lose 37-17. And plays like that are a big reason why. Momentum shifts like that are a big reason why. You get it to even 17-17, and then the Eagles take the lead, 3 plays, 2 first downs, and a deep touchdown to Devontae Smith.
And to get it to 17-17, you have a really nice drive to do it. 13 plays, 70 yards, 6 minutes, and it looks efficient. They only faced 2 third downs on that drive, and one of them was after a very tough drop from Andre Josevach, which put them in a position that they've been in often in this game where they got into these third downs, but they were able to convert them. They converted 2 on that drive. One of them, Joe Burrow passed to Mike Gesicki on 3rd and 6. The other one, that 3rd and 8, where Burrow scrambles and gets there with a massive individual effort. And this is when it's like, yeah, Joe Burrow's putting the team on his back. Mm-hmm. And again, like I said, they come back out, and it's this thing that we've talked about time and time again. It's that drive that I just talked about before we finished our first segment. Right after that Eagles explosive touchdown drive, where they go 23 yards to AJ Brown, with Cam Taylor-Britt giving up a ton of space and respecting the vertical ability when AJ Brown's able to just snap it off, and the open pockets allow all these deep developing routes to be uncontested essentially for Jalen Hurts and the Eagles offense. And then they get that deep ball to Devontae Smith. The very next drive is when they can't throw a pass until they throw it behind the sticks. And this is just so frustrating to watch play out again and again, where, yeah, maybe they're worried about protection because Joe Burrow's scrambling right after a play fake on that first down play, and Cody Ford's in the game at this point. And, you know, things are a little bit touch and go in protection in this game against a good Eagles defensive front. But then they run it again. Like, the run game was just awful. They run it for a yard. They take it out of Joe's hands, run it for a yard, run it for no gain with an extra lineman. They don't go back to that reverse wishbone thing that we saw from them last week, where they were getting advantageous matchups. And maybe that's because they don't have T, but you can't just turn into this turtle offense that can't run the ball for a yard and won't let Joe Burrow throw it because you don't have T. And so while missing T does matter, you cannot have a sequence where in a critical moment of the game, you go 1 yard run, no yard run, throw behind the line of scrimmage when you have Joe Burrow at quarterback.
No doubt. No doubt. I was fine going for it. I was fine with them throwing it. Not fine with basically a pitch to Jamar Chase. When you're motioning him and trying to move him, and it's similar to what the Miami Dolphins have done historically with Tyreek Hill, where they do that, and then they get him to in space and he can just kind of run to the sticks or run to the corner of the goal line. It's really hard to do. It's really hard to do. And Cooper DeJean made a good play, but it doesn't matter. I just don't like it there. It's not your bread and butter. It can be other people's bread and butter. It can be Tyreek's, but it's not the Bengals. And I think that's where the game was right then. It's like, all right, this is on life support, and they force the field goal. So it's 27-17. That's the one win for the defense there, I would say, of the second half, forcing or holding the Eagles to a field goal there. That is a good job. I know it's not a complete stop, but it's a good job. It keeps them in the game. What did you think about the interception? Joe talked about it. He said he laid it out a little short. It gets batted. It's bad luck that it gets picked in my eyes. So I don't really fault them for taking a shot there, but sometimes things start to snowball. And I thought that was the snowball effect where you're like, oh man, this is unraveling quickly.
Yeah. He threw one earlier in the game over the middle that could have been picked.
Yeah. Cooper DeJean dropped it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then this one is Isaiah Rodgers on Jamar Chase's hip on a go ball. And I'm pretty sure it's single high. I haven't seen a replay to confirm that, but where the safety was, where he caught the interception on the deflection, is generally where you see a safety coming over from playing single high.
I think it was. Yeah.
And so I'm never going to be upset with Joe Burrow taking Jamar Chase one-on-one with the backup corner, because Darius Slayton dealing with an injury in this game, who also had an awesome play against Jermaine Burton in the end zone on a play where you'd like Jermaine Burton to make the play, but Darius Slay made a good play there. I mean, you tip your hat to the backup corner, I guess, Isaiah Rodgers, for sticking with Jamar Chase. Maybe it's a tad underthrown if Joe's saying so. I guess I'll take his word on it. I haven't gone and watched it again, but looked like it was relatively accurate ball. Jamar didn't have any separation there. You would expect him to against a backup corner. Isaiah Rodgers does have the speed, obviously, to keep up there. But yeah, I think that's just a bad break at that point in the game that really tells you about how the game is going. But honestly, when you only get one stop the entire game and you're the Bengals, even if the Bengals convert that play and go score and don't get a stop the rest of the game, they still lose because they're down 10 and they're giving up points on every drive.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, it's tough. It's tough when you're giving up points every drive. Let's continue the conversation. It's been rough, but we will finish it off coming up next. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Marvin Lewis is coming to town this week. That's right. Marvin Lewis will be back here at Paycor Stadium, where I am right now, on Sunday for a Week 9 matchup that, dare I say, oh, yes, I will say it's must win. And if you want to watch this Bengals team face off against Marvin Lewis here at Paycor, well, you got to get to the Gametime app. Gametime makes getting tickets to any live event so much easier. It takes all of the guesswork, all of the worry, all of the concern, all of the stress, throws all of that out the window, and it makes it really, really easy. They have this new feature called Gametime Picks, and it filters out all of the fluff to show you incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. They also have all-in pricing, so you see exactly what your tickets are going to cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. And they have seat views that are awesome, panoramic seat views that show you exactly what it's going to be when you sit down at your favorite venue, favorite event that you're looking to go to. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NFL, LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
Now, Joe Burrow sitting up there at his podium after the game, doing math, trying to figure out, well, we can win 7 out of 9. Zach Taylor's taking a little bit of accountability for a fourth down play that didn't work, talking about the lack of meeting expectations as a team. And in the locker room, there's a clear understanding that what they're doing isn't good enough. But nobody seems to have answers. I don't have answers. I didn't hear a whole lot in the way of answers from anyone. And I think that's emblematic of being frustrated after losing a game, the way they lost this game, where they felt like they probably had a beat on things early and it got away from them. But it really got away from them. And I think that makes it tough to feel like there are answers available to you. And they look so different this week than last week too, from like a game planning situation and everything. And maybe that's because they lose T, but where are you at from that perspective, from what you heard and saw after the game in the locker room?
I think they're definitely searching, no doubt. I think they viewed it, our theme coming into this game, I think they viewed it that way. I think it was pretty in lockstep of this. All right, well, this is your chance to show everyone, to make us believe, was what we coined on our pregame show. And I think they believe, and they're like, all right, we're going to make everyone believe. And we're going to go out there and show who we are. And if that's who they are, well, then they're going to miss the playoffs for a second straight year. That's the bottom line. If that's what they are, that's the 2024 Bengals. Now, to Joe's point, is there time? He got asked, like, when is the hole too deep, essentially? And so he just gave a pretty straightforward. I don't think he's counting games. I think Joe is replaying like every play in his head right now, and is probably really frustrated, and is probably wondering what a lot of people are. How good is this team? They can be good. I do think they can be good, but will they be good? And will they figure it out quick enough? It needs to be figured out like now. And we can talk about the schedule and what games matter more than others and all of those things, but they're 3-5, and they had a shot today, Jake, to gain a game on Baltimore. Miami lost. Like these teams that are like fringe playoff teams or teams division leaders, who knows what happens with Pittsburgh? Like they had a chance here to make up some ground, despite playing an NFC team, and you get to 4-4, and it just completely unraveled, and it doesn't feel even good, because it's not like you can say, all right, well, the defense, they struggled so much because this guy was out or these guys were out. No, Trey Hendrickson lost to Fred Johnson today. Sam Hubbard lost to whatever tight end on that play. Jordan Battle lost to Devontae Smith. All these guys have issues. Joe Burrow said it. They need to be accountable. The self-accountability needs to be there. There isn't a guy on the roster that didn't make a mistake today. Even the guys that didn't get in the game. They messed up something on the sideline with the water. They had to have. Because there's no way you play that back. All right, I'll stop the joke. But you get my point. It's like nothing went right in that second half. Everyone from Jermaine Burton running and not being on the same page as Joe at the end of the first half, even though he makes a great play and nearly had the touch. Everyone has something they can improve on. And they need to look in the mirror. You mentioned this. Head coaches, maybe front office. We'll talk about that. Certainly the players, the entire coaching staff, they have to figure it out now. Because you know what you can't do? I mentioned in the game time read. The Raiders are coming to town next week. You can't lose to the Raiders. And if you beat the Raiders by 3, we're going to be standing here next week talking, and we're going to be like, well, what does that mean? The Raiders stink. So they better get their head out of their rear and show us who they are. And if this is who they are, then all right, then just be this and stop teasing us. But if you're going to be good, then damn it, be good. And it better start next week. And this was the make us believe game. And if anything, it's making us doubt but just believe that they're a bad team after a 37-17 loss.
I mean, they are what they are right now. And until they're not what they are, that's what they are, which is a way of saying they're a bad team, right? Like they're not making the plays they need to make to win games, except against the worst teams.
We thought they were.
And they're still on the hook. Trust me on that. There's a lot to talk about because to me, and we're not going to get very far into it today, there's just like it's screaming at me in my head, like the need to make some sort of big change and finding some sort of direction. You can still see the ghost of the teams that were good, 21, 22. And even last year in the middle of the year.
They were good last year. They were a good
got to the
team
point where they were a good team last year. And then things fell apart down the stretch. They really fell apart after Joe got hurt. But even still, they were able to win some games with Jake Browning, which we didn't think at the time of the injury was a very realistic thing to consider. This year is not that. They've lost too much talent, or they're too stale, or the coaching changes that they did make are steps in the wrong direction, whatever it is. Things are not working right now. And this game doesn't come with any of the closeness that some of their earlier losses came with that helped us to kind of rationalize them a little bit. And it comes with a lot of the same mistakes that we've seen year after year after year. And the theme this year specifically is just about not making the plays they need to make. You can go back to the first half when they get a 3rd and 16 after an unnecessary roughness penalty that leads to eventually that Philadelphia touchdown and the back-to-back touchdowns essentially in and out of the half to take that 17-10 lead. You get off the field on that 3rd and 16. Well, maybe the game does go differently. Maybe the defense does get some sort of momentum going, has something figured out. Instead, the Eagles start rolling at that point, don't get stopped the rest of the game outside of that one field goal you mentioned, James. I guess 2 field goals after the Bengals turned it over on short fields.
Yeah. And maybe the offense gets it going too, right? And it just like, that's what I meant earlier. It's like, but it unraveled fast. Now, it doesn't mean that it was a close game.
Yeah.
Go ahead. What?
Well, I was going to say it unraveled fast and it unraveled hard. Like they were clearly outplayed in the second half. It was mistake after mistake after mistake from the coaching staff, from the bounce on the interception, from Mike Gesicki's fumble. And it's not like it's like a last-minute pass interference penalty where they have the game won instead, if that doesn't happen against Kansas City. Or it's not like, the pick from Joe Burrow against Baltimore where he's rolling and they have 3 separate 10-point leads in the second half and 1 stop means they beat Baltimore. And then we're talking about them beating really good teams. That wasn't the case today. There was no like one play you can point to because they got boat raced when things got away from them.
No doubt. Yeah, it was today. It's that one play where it helped cause things to unravel. And there's like 3 examples, So yeah. And then it unraveled completely. I'll say this. If they had lost by like 3, I would have been like, okay. Like if it was like 37-34, like, all right, well, we know the defense isn't that great, but offense still moved the ball well. Like it would have felt much differently, I think. And I think I'm getting the vibe from that's the processing part of this. It's like it was 37-17. They weren't close.
No,
it was not close. And I keep going back to that first half, man. Against good teams, I thought that they played pretty darn well. You cannot go into halftime without a lead there. I bet the Eagles felt like they were like, woo-hoo-hoo, it's tied.
Especially the way it went. Like the Bengals
Yeah.
get stopped, miss a field goal, and then they convert a 3rd and 16. You get a penalty in the end zone to give them 4. Like they had how many plays from like inside the 5 going into the half? Like
so many.
Yeah, it's just a really worst case end of the first half. So while the first 4 drives were great for the Bengals, right? You prefer they finish that second drive with a touchdown. They get a field goal stop. They force 2 kicks in the first 2 drives of the game, and they score 10. And then after that, I mean, it's just downhill to the point that I'm questioning a whole lot of things, James. And I think that's what we're going to talk about this week.
Yeah, we have plenty of time to discuss that this week. Stick with us. Make sure that you listen wherever you get your podcast. Certainly subscribe on YouTube, and we'll get through this together. It is officially Marvin Lewis week.
Hooray! Right? Is that I don't know how to react to Marvin Lewis week.
It could be hooray if they kick the crap out of him.
Yeah.
If not, then it's a whole nother discussion, and we'll have plenty of time, like I said, to talk about that.
Yeah. That's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Really, really bad game for the Bengals today. Until next time, thanks for listening and have a good one.